Yep, you can use that.
Okay. Well, Ian closed with talking about this recent document that came out from the American Planning Association, and I'm really going to talk about that as well. We're thinking sort of out in the same lines, developed this presentation prior to this document coming out, but we're really talking about the same thing in terms of engaging long-range planning in this issue. Just want to say I'm here with 5 of my colleagues from Boulder County, and this is really a joint presentation. A lot of people helped contribute to this, so Molly Moulter and Amy Weaver from our GIS departments really put a lot of effort into doing this analysis, and so we have a lot of folks involved here that I'd like to thank. I'm going to talk a lot about the WUI. I assume you're sort of familiar with that acronym, and just in case a few aren't, the Wildland Urban Interface is what I'm going to focus on today. And start off with sort of a humorous depiction of a response to a single tree lightning strike in Boulder County. Today I'm not going to talk about suppression and response. Obviously suppression and response are a real key component of this issue. Number one priority for a lot of reasons. They do a great job, a lot of effort in terms of that area. But today really I'm going to focus on looking at some long-range planning issues. I mean, there's a lot going on right today, and a lot of efforts, but I'm really not going to focus on today's activity, what's happening out in the field right now, but try to take a long-term view. Right now, we're telling our residents to be prepared. We're out hammering the message on all fronts about defensible space and preparation. So we're really going out, really telling our residents they need to be prepared. And the question I really have that I want to talk about today is, are we at local governments prepared for the long term? Are we ready for wildfires in 2035, that Metro Vision 2035 date and beyond? You know, do our long-range plans, Ian mentioned comprehensive plans, are we ready for that future threat of wildfires? And do we really fully understand all of the costs associated with this risk? And some of the planning tools, like I mentioned, all the tools that are available to address this issue. So look forward to really a lively discussion in the Q&A about a lot of these questions. First, I just want to ask sort of the question of who cares? Why is this important? You know, why should we prepare for future wildfires? Well, they have a really significant impact that I'll talk about, and these impacts are increasing, and we can make a difference. So in terms of so what question? This presentation is not about the Fourmile fire, but I'm going to give a little background on the Fourmile fire because that sort of sets the stage for us for this issue. It's one of the reasons we're here. You know, the common tagline for the fire is the most expensive fire in Colorado history in terms of insured loss. But actually, at the time, if you look at it, it was the 8th most expensive fire in the country, and the first 7 being California. So at the time, it was the most expensive fire, outside of California in the history of the U.S. I mean, now with Texas and what happened last year, we get bumped down a notch. But it really was a significant event that had an enormous impact on our community. It's really hard to describe all the impacts. Obviously, at the time, thousands of people, evacuations, the uncertainty if their homes were lost. So a huge impact on the entire community. 169 homes were lost in that fire in 2010. So most people are familiar with that. 6,000 acres. Most of the homes were lost in the first 12 hours. 157 of the 169 homes were lost. The initial attempt by the fire officials were just evacuations and safety, not protecting structures. So the homes were lost very quickly. Big issue was underinsurance. A lot of the homes survey we did, 60% uninsured by almost $200,000 average. And some people are still working on settling their claims for the insurance. So a lot of people assume, people have insurance, they can just rebuild, it's easy, but that's really a long, traumatic process. It's not simple. Just the start of this debris removal step and the issues with asbestos were complicated problems. So a lot of impacts on, obviously the homeowners, on the watershed. Oops, I'll go back one. Doesn't like this slide. A lot of community meetings. I mean, the residents needing information. What do we do? Spend a lot of time meeting with residents, working through them all of the issues. And it was local government that played a big role in terms of helping out the local residents. After the fire, major concern and one major reason local governments involved with the increased risk of flooding and debris flows after a fire. And so a lot of attention in the last couple of years has been spent addressing that problem. Aerial mulching, seeding, reseeding to reduce erosion, and that impact of the future debris flows. 2.5 million grants the first year from state, federal organizations to help reseed public and mostly private lands, and that again to reduce the risk. So we received money first year. The second year, no federal or state money, so the county came up with $364,000 to do this aerial mulching reseeding effort to try to reduce the risk of flooding and debris flow. And an enormous volunteer effort. The county sponsored in the first year 10 volunteer events, 850 volunteers, thousands of volunteer hours, just to try to rehabilitate the land and address this risk of flooding. Something's not working very well here.
You can switch to the mouse or the arrows.
There we go. So we had 2 debris flows the first year. Our transportation department, county funds, $800,000 spent. $400,000 directly related to the debris flows and cleaning up the roads. But, this is a major impact, and these impacts will continue risk of flooding for many years. So it's, a lot of effort with residents, big risk of flooding after fires. And building, obviously, rebuilding those 169 homes, big effort by the land use department to go through the rebuilding process. Right now, those 169 homes, we've had 57 who've applied for a building permit, and we've had 17 that are currently back in the home. So it's not a quick process. 57 have applied for building permits, and 17 back into their, 56, excuse me, and 17 back into their own homes. So that being said, there's a common assumption out there after fire that the federal and state governments are the ones that are going to step up with the necessary financial support, technical support. But what we found is a lot of that responsibility falls on local governments. And a cost analysis of the cost of just the recovery. This doesn't include suppression, response, just looking at documented, this says estimated expenses. It should be documented expenses that we've received. That county share is right now equal to that federal share. And we know what the federal and state money we've received. The county money, there's a lot of estimates. I mean, these are the documented county's expenses. There's a lot more expenses that we weren't able to document. Hundreds of workers not keeping track of their time working on this event. So there's a lot of other county expenses that aren't included in this figure. And our county expenses will continue with the flooding and that risk, where the state and federal monies, they stop. And we are actually lucky in these percentages. We received $500,000 in stimulus money, and that it's not going to happen after every fire because that stimulus money is not going to be available all that time. So actually we were fortunate in many respects to receive as much state and federal money as we have. In the land use department, just talking, a lot of planners here, our costs for processing and working with homeowners on rebuilding with $500,000. So it's not cheap on county budgets to recover. And so that's one of the reasons why we're raising these issues, because they do have a lot of impacts on county expenditures. And I'm just sort of talking county government now. Obviously, the Fourmile fire had enormous impacts, human impacts, on the people that are affected. The emotional, the psychological, all those issues that you go through after a fire. I'm not really mentioning those today. Those are enormous. Just talking about some of the financial costs that really underestimates the true impact of these catastrophic events. But that's almost the good news, because one of the major concerns, and one reason we're here today, and Ian touched on this, is wildfires have certainly been a significant issue in the past, but wildfire issues are growing. The trends are clear. Talk about climate change. Ian mentioned some of these figures. We're seeing increased frequency, size, severity of fires, and that's expected to increase in the future. And of course, that'll vary by area, but we're seeing a growing frequency, number, severity of fires. And that's associated with climate change. We're seeing increased temperatures, been documented. And with average temperature increases in the past, we've seen a direct correlation with increased number of wildfires. Here's some Oregon statistics, and we can come up with Colorado statistics as well, but a fairly minor increase in temperature and a significant increase in the number of wildfires. Ian mentioned the snowpack. Our snowpack is melting earlier, and that directly corresponds to a longer fire season. Here's some analysis that's been done for across the West. What they found is in the past, early snow melt has had the greatest impact of the fires at this elevation here. The greatest frequency increase has been at 2130. I'm not the greatest with numbers, and so I wanted to see what this actually meant. So this first figure here will be the next map in yellow that Amy did in terms of where we see the greatest impact across the entire West in the past of this increased early snow melt. The second one will be the red figure in terms of where we see the most fires. So just looking at the DRCOG region, these are some areas that are expected to see that impact, or have seen the impact in the past, and we'll see additional impacts in the future. We need to do much better research for our area to find out what the future impacts are, but this is sort of an indication of what we're seeing. You know, we don't need to look at old journal articles 5 or 6 years ago to tell us about the fire season expanding. I mean, we've experienced it here. I mean, in the last couple of months, if you've been in the area with our dry March fire bans, you know, our old research shows, you know, through 2003, we've seen a 78-day increase in those two periods. But, you know, it makes sense, just people who are here have seen an increase in that fire season. So let's look at some of the numbers. Ian showed some of the numbers. This is data from the Colorado State Forest Service. There's some things missing here. I'll help walk you through it a little bit. The acres are on the side. What's missing is, on the other axis, the number of fires. It's actually the same number that's on your left-hand axis there. You just take off a 0. What we have here is just state and private fires. This is not, I mean, obviously fires on public land and Forest Service are important, but in terms of focusing on this statistic, as a building department, we really care about fires on private lands because that impacts us more than you know, the federal lands. But this shows a dramatic increase in the 2000 in the size of fires. And so the question is this an aberration or is this a trend? Unfortunately, it's a trend. I mean, this is happening all over the West. Research shows that fires are increasing in size. This just is not the Hayman fire. Obviously, we had a huge fire, 2002 Hayman, which was mostly on public land. So that really doesn't reflect this graph here is talking about private land. So the Hayman fire is a small percentage, 12% of that fire was private land. So we've seen a dramatic increase from 2000 to 2009. This doesn't yet include the Fourmile fire. This is not 2010, 11, 12. And we've seen, you know, we don't know what this next decade is going to look like in terms of the size of fires 2010. We have to wait to the end of the decade to know that. But the first 2.5 years, you know, it's looking like this is an increasing trend. I mean, we don't have statistics, the same statistics for this first 2 years. What I do have is just the number of total fires in the state. It's, again, the same source, Colorado State Forest Service. And what you have there on the right is just in the first 2 years, the number of fires, or 55% more fires than the whole decade before, where you saw that huge 443% increase. So we see a growing trend of the number of wildfires in the area. So what can we do? I'm going to talk about 3 areas: forestry, forests, our homes, and the people. And the first aspect for us, I'm going to just go through quickly because Mike, in the final presentation, is really going to focus on this. Ian mentioned, you know, we have a lot of existing programs in forest management. This is a really key area. We're working on a FEMA grant application to do forest management around our critical facilities, and that's really going to be helpful for us, key partnership with the state and Ken, to get a lot more forest treatment in the area. We have a very active forest management program in our Parks and Open Space Department. Through our CWPP, we're developing partnerships. So a lot of activity on the forest end, but there's a lot of challenges there too. You know, we have a lot of land to treat, little money, as Ian mentioned. You know, some of the tools are in question. So forestry is a major part of this, and I'll let Mike talk more, but look forward to a really lively Q&A about forest management. In terms of homes, you know, obviously a lot of effort to protect homes. We have a site plan review requirements through our land use code where we require ignition-resistant construction, defensible space. And we have a lot of efforts in terms of education and outreach, community forestry short yards for slash, chipping programs, but a lot of challenges associated with this as well. Our SBR regulations there deal with new homes, but what about the existing home stock? Is a big challenge. Maintaining defensible space. It's not putting it in once, it's doing it continually. And the question of who is responsible. Is this a local government responsibility? We try to empower individual homeowners. It's their responsibility to protect their homes, but with the flooding risk and other factors, local government's been taking a role here. Obviously, the insurance industry, glad Carol is here, and we can talk about that more in question and answer, the role of the insurance industry in protecting homes. But this is obviously a major issue. What we lack is a lot of information about the effectivenesses of the program. We can have a lot of regulations on the books, but the question is, are they effective? Are they working? Are they achieving the outcome that we want? So looking at our home survival during the Fourmile fire, we had a UDOL commissioned assessment, and they went through and counted the number of homes in the burn perimeter and the number of homes that were destroyed, number of homes survived. And the final figure there was 65% of the homes survived. And that's a typical number based on the researchers that range from wildfires across the country. So we received, as a total, 65%. I think, the question is, how do we increase this percentage? How can we have more homes that survive the wildfires? And so, what happened with our homes? We have this SBR requirement. Did this have an impact on survivability? So this is Molly's research where we looked at all the homes that went through our site plan review process. We had 49 homes, new homes that were constructed, and we had a percentage of 84% of those homes survived. Looking at here, you can tell in this picture, I'll run through some pictures, that the construction and defensible space were key factors in the survivability of this house here. Just to give you a sense of when those 49 homes were built that went through the site plan reviews process. Most of those were built in the 90s. 9 out of the 49 were built in 2000 period. And what we saw is a higher percentage of homes built more recently survived. So the 8 homes we lost, all those were in the 90s. So in terms of some of our findings, initial findings from this research, we're continuing. 62% of the homes that didn't go through the site plan review requirement survived, where those that went through the site plan review process, we increased that percentage to 84%, a 35% increase. And we also saw an increasing percentage over time, because we certainly got better from 1993 to today in improving our regulations in that process. So we see an increase over time that process was improved. So that's encouraging. But there's a long way to go in terms of additional things that we can do to improve that. Just take you through a couple pictures quickly in some of the homes that were able to survive the fire that went through the site plan review process. This home is an example. If this was not built with a ignition-resistant construction, wouldn't have survived. That construction, in this case, helped this home survive. Another example of a home that went through our process where building materials were key in its fate. Here's a home that was highlighted in the UDOL assessment for its work. It survived. This is another picture of the home. It sits in a very precarious position there, top of a gulch. This fire started right at the below and headed to this home. And this homeowner had spent 15 years doing active defensible space work. And it's credited in saving some of its neighbors, that thinning out, the reducing of the trees in that defensible space, helped change fire behavior, move it around, and credited saving some of the neighbors. So it's just not saving your own home, but also what you do in your own home affects your neighbors. And here's just another aerial view of that home, an example of defensible space helping out. But we didn't have all successes. This was an example of a home that was a model defensible space home, advertised as such, thought it did everything right, but was destroyed. One of the things is it was built in the 1970s, so it didn't go through our site plan review process. So even though it had maybe some of the best defensible space, the key of that ignition-resistant construction plays a big role. Some people see this and say, okay, defensible space doesn't work because that was our model and the homeowner knew a lot about it. So there's still, it's not 100% guaranteed if we go through these processes that homes survive, and we still have a lot to learn about saving homes. And we do a lot. Jill is really going to talk about community wildfire protection plans. Boulder County has a community wildfire protection plan. I'm not going to go through it. It's a great document. You can find it on Boulder County, cwpp.org. Spent a lot of time talking about different ways of protecting homes, but it's a long process. A lot of outreach, a lot of homes out there that need protection. Now I'm going to sort of switch gears and talk about development in the WUI. Yeah, okay. Ian mentioned some of the projections of increased growth in the WUI, and that's a major concern. It's really what economists call, the safe development paradox. We're subsidizing development in risky areas, and so question of how long is that subsidy going to last? Talk about increasing firefighting budget. How many items in the budget do you know that have doubled over the last decade? Probably not money. That $3 billion figure. How long is that going to continue? What the implications of that? Are more costs going to be passed on to local governments? I think there's a lot of questions to ask in terms of development in the WUI, future wildfire costs. We have a lot of impacts there. We don't really have good numbers. Ian cited the Colorado State University analysis of growth in the WUI, national analysis. It really doesn't apply well to Boulder County or a lot of other ones. We need better data and better research to look at potential growth in the WUI. I mean, they're talking about 300-400% increase in Boulder population or Boulder size of the WUI between those periods, and that's not what's really happening. But we need better data. I think the number of people in the WUI is a key indicator that we should track through DRCOG. And we have indicators, we have measures that we track, how many homes we have there, and what the growth rate is important information to monitor and keep track of. Here's an analysis from Headwaters Economics. It sort of shows Boulder as the top county in the state with the most developed WUI. So we're not here to point fingers. We're ground zero. We have the problems. We have a lot of issues to address. The other thing to note quickly from this slide, I'm running a little behind, is the definition of the WUI is really important. Here they define the WUI as 500 meters from public land. So Douglas County doesn't get a big WUI. Boulder County, we get a large WUI because partly because our parks and open space and some of the public lands there. But defining that WUI is important. But addressing these issues of the number of folks that we expect there in the long term. We have a comprehensive plan that's been key. Our last subdivision approved in the mountains was in 1973. So our goals of our comprehensive plan are really to direct future development towards existing urban areas, and that's been really helpful. We have policies and goals related to development in the WUI. And if you look at the millions of dollars that have been spent on forest management, very important. We'll spend millions more. We spend millions of dollars in protecting homes, and we'll spend millions more, and that's important. But these policies, in terms of their cost effectiveness, are really significant. I mean, we could have easily had much larger number of homes in that Fourmile fire burn perimeter if we hadn't had limits on the number of homes in that area. So it's a very cost-effective tool. These policies and regulations, what we really want to talk about in our discussions. And in terms of long-range plans, we have a lot of departments, a lot of areas that really do a good job in terms of looking at the long term. Our water providers, and Mike will talk about that, they're doing scenario planning for the future. They know that they need to look ahead their long time frames. We need to do the same thing in the area of wildfire issues. There's a lot that we can talk about. The DRCOG MetroVision 2035, as Tom mentioned, right now currently doesn't include the word wildfire. Our contention is it's an important regional issue that we can address, so we've submitted an amendment to DRCOG to add that to the plan. We think it's really important, and will have a big impact on our region in the future. The community wildfire protection plans are great. They tend to focus on current day, and so we need efforts to really incorporate these issues. In the past 23 years, we've had a number of large fires. The question is, what's going to happen in the next 23 years? Are we going to see the same number? Are we going to see twice as many? Are they going to be more destructive? These are important questions that we need to look at in terms of our visioning process. And so that's why we're really here today to discuss things. What do we want our WUI to look like? And how planners, through this document here, we've got lots of tools. What can planners do to address this issue from the people side and to collaborate with the foresters and the firefighters and the building officials, the emergency managers that Ian talked about to realize this vision. So I'll just end you with the story of the Black Swan. The story of the Black Swan, famous in project management circles. Black Swan in Europe for many, many years, decades, no one thought a black swan existed. Eventually in Australia, people discovered that, yeah, we do have black swans. So in project management, they use the term black swan as something that couldn't have been anticipated. There's no way, and we try to plan for all contingencies, but if something comes out of the blue, that's a black swan. Okay, we couldn't have prepared for that. Well, we can't think about wildfires in the future as a black swan. We can't come up with the excuse, oh, we didn't realize that was going to happen. We can't give the excuse things that aren't in our planning documents that we didn't anticipate that. We know wildfires are going to continue to happen, so we have to plan for them. We can't sort of use that black swan excuse that it's we didn't know about it. So thanks for that, and look forward to our discussion in the Q&A.
Yep, you can use that.
Okay. Well, Ian closed with talking about this recent document that came out from the American Planning Association, and I'm really going to talk about that as well. We're thinking